Thanks, Stephen. And yeah, that's a tough act to follow. Just about anything I think would seem a bit trivial after that. So anyway, onward. So it's lovely to be here. There's a bit of a TED tradition, as TED fans will know, of visualization demos at TED. David McCandless, Ben Fry, Hans Rosling. So I'm not feeling any pressure at all right now. Absolutely fine. Okay, so as Stephen just alluded to, cultural collections are these incredible treasures in our society. They are the storehouses of, literally our heritage. They've got all of this incredibly good stuff in them, ginormous amounts of it, and they are at the core of us preserving ourselves as a culture going forward. They're tremendously valuable things, but recently something has happened which has made them, in a sense, even more valuable. They also pose some new challenges. They've become digital objects. So all of those treasure houses have already or are in the process of becoming digital treasure houses. They're becoming digitised. All those objects, all those artworks, I'm talking about galleries, libraries, archives, museums, all those collections, they're all becoming digital objects. What happens then? Let's have a little snapshot rolling through a few cultural institutions, some close to home, some further afield. There's the MoMA there at the end. So if we just take that little sample, we can see some interesting tendencies about how these things operate. The search box is ubiquitous. A search box is like looking through one of Sidney Nolan's Ned Kellys through that slot, yeah? It's like looking at the world through a letterbox. See that beautiful sky? And see the little tiny piece of the sky that you can see through the search box. That's a pretty good analogy for how I think search works. Search is a slot and a way of thinking that dominates the way we access and work with digital cultural collections. So in terms of thinking way beyond, my pitch in this presentation is, how do we get out of that little slot? How can we kind of open that up and try and see a bit more widely at these digital collections? So search is currently the interface to these things. It's a totally dominant interface, I would argue. Interestingly and parenthetically, it's not only the interface to those collections, it's our interface to actually just about everything at the moment. I'll leave that one with you. So I'm not going to completely trash search here, because search is fantastic. It works great, especially if you know what you're looking for and you know what's in the collection. Now, those two things, unfortunately, are not true of almost anyone searching a cultural collection, especially if they're not sort of savvy with the contents of that collection already. When you search a collection, you get back a huge pile of stuff arrayed in hundreds and hundreds of pages of items, which you then have to sift through. Not a particularly good outcome in terms of discovering things. I'd like to also argue, though, that search in these collections is sort of an attitude. It's an attitude to the user. Imagine if you're going to the NGA and instead of walking into a beautiful gallery, you walk into a little lobby with an attendant who hands you a slip of paper and says, please write down your query. They go away into a back room and then they come back with huge piles of objects and say, okay, here you go. Here's room 1, here's room 2, here's room 3, here's room 4. We don't do that. A physical institution doesn't do that. They say instead, come in, look at all this awesome stuff we've got. Let us show you all of this incredible stuff. So why can't we do that digitally? You might say, well, search is all we have. How else can we do this? How else can we query these huge collections? I don't know that actually search is all we have. I think there might be some alternatives. And basically, I'm going to show you really quickly some experiments that I've done with trying to work out how visualization can provide alternatives to search with big digital collections. So this is a project that was supported by the National Archives of Australia a couple of years ago. So I'd like to acknowledge them. So what can we do instead of search? In this case, we can borrow a motto from one of my favourite designers, US-based Stamen Design. They say, well, why can't we show everything? They break every rule in the visualization book in a way by saying, well, let's just show everything, can we? Let's try. So in the National Archives collection, you've got about 9 million items and about 65,000 series. 9 million sounds a bit scary, so let's take the smaller number first. How could we do 65,000 series? How could we show all of that? Here's one go. Here's one try. This is a prototype. All this stuff, by the way, you can get on the web, you can find it. In this image, every box, every coloured box is one series. There are 65,000 boxes in that image. Every box is a series. Every series contains a whole bunch of items. But at the moment, the series are just laid out top to bottom chronologically, and the size of the box relates to the size of the series. So you can instantly see where the big series are, where the small ones are, and what the distribution of series is over time. You can see everything. It's the whole collection. Even cooler, though, is that it's interactive. So once you zoom in a little bit on this, you can hover over these elements. You can find out what those series are. You can discover their attributes. Even cooler, you can discover how they link with other series. Linking is crucial. Linking tells you about relationships. So these are all relationships that this series has with a bunch of others. The links send you out into the collection, and then you can start to browse around, discover other series, and discover new relationships. You can discover that this group of photographic negatives is connected with another one, which is connected with another one, and then you can go on from there. So you start to move through a collection, and instead of getting back little chunks of the collection all isolated, you get networks, you get links, you get relationships, and as you navigate them, you start to understand a bit more about the structure of the collection. Because understanding these things is not just understanding the stuff that's in them, it's understanding the structures in them, it's understanding the relationships. Then you have context. Then you have a better sense of what these things are, where they're from, what they're made of. In this case, we can also look at what made these collections, because all these series were made by agencies. So here's an agency. Every box highlighted in orange was also created by that agency. So now we can browse those again, and so on. So as a show everything, it's completely impractical, but it's doable. It's not really feasible to inspect every single one of those series, but you can certainly understand those relationships and start to browse the collection. So that shows us relationships, it shows us time, it shows us the provenance of those series, where they came from, what created them. It doesn't actually show us what's in the series, so let's have a look at how we can see what's inside those series, what's in those boxes. In this case, we're looking at a single series, it's called A1, it's one of the kind of crown jewels in the archives collection. So here, coincidentally, we've got about 65,000 items to look at, but we're looking at them a different way. Up the top, you can see a whole bunch of words. Those words belong to the titles of those items, the titles of the documents. The bigger the word is, the more titles it occurs in. So naturalisation, for example, occurs in nearly 50,000 of those documents. You can see that straight away. You can also see it's linked with this word certificate. Certificate occurs in about 18,000 of those items. In the histogram along here, you can see how it occurs in time, so you can see the historical distribution of those terms as well. As you explore, you can discover some of the actual records themselves and find out about their attributes. In this case, we can see there's lots of naturalisation documents. Here we're actually focusing in on a term, so we're focusing in on a single term. Now we're looking at 320 items. We've just gone from 65,000 to 320. Now we're looking at everything to do everything that has a title that includes the word Norfolk. Not surprisingly, Ireland is there as well. And so then, again, we can discover more relationships. We can see that crown and lease are connected. And if we select one of those terms, we can discover those records. So again, I didn't come into this thinking, I wonder what was going on with crown leases in Norfolk Island around 1915. I discovered that relationship. And now maybe I might actually be interested and go, what do you know? Never thought of that. So you get interesting things. See lemon there? There's a bit of homework. Find out what was going on with lemons in Norfolk Island. So here we're going to actually do the opposite. We're going to exclude a term. So here we're going to set aside that big batch of 50,000 records. In one click, we just go exclude that term, and now we're looking at everything else. Everything else pops out. So here's all the other relationships which are not in the naturalisation records. All kinds of good stuff. Again, Northern and Territory, you can see linked together. Let's have a look at Darwin, focus in on Darwin. Look at that spike, 1937. What's going on? Look at those relationships. What happened in Darwin in 1937? Can you guess? We can work it out by looking at the titles of the records. Even better, if we select one of those records and pull it up, we can actually get the document. So this is actually loading those documents up from the NAA server. So we've just gone from 65,000 items down to a tiny handful, down to one, and now we're actually getting the record. We're actually getting the digital document off the institution server. Visualization is more than just understanding the big picture, it's more than just seeing the patterns. Visualization, when it's interactive and live, is an interface that can take you right the way to the digital document, to the original stuff. That's the good stuff. That's the really awesome stuff that you want to get to. So here's just another example of some of the lovely documents that are in here. This is a great story about a Japanese labourer who stole a purling lugger off Broome in 1914. That's his handprint. It's just gorgeous stuff. This is why I love doing this work, because the material in there is so good. It's gorgeous. Here's another example. In this case, we're looking at the Flickr Commons collection. So Flickr Commons, big collections of images from major collecting institutions around the world. We're going to look at the State Library of New South Wales collection. So here the documents are images. Down the bottom are tiny little excerpts of every image in the collection. Again, very simple. Show everything. Why not? This is relatively easy. There's only nearly 900 of them. Again, we've got the title terms, and again, we can see relationships. So Sam and Hood, what's going on there? And Sydney. We can pretty easily discover, when we look at some of the thumbnails, that Sam Hood was a photographer. Many of these images were created by Sam Hood. And so there, again, we've discovered something we didn't know. Focusing in on a term, Sydney, again, we can focus in on more terms, discover more elements. Here we're looking at bridges. We can pull up an image, and then if we hit that image, we actually end up on Flickr. So again, it's linked. It's taking you to the live document. In this case, the live document is the Flickr image. Again, this is about seeing relationships and patterns. Using image data is a beautiful way to do it, because images themselves, the content of the image tells you about itself. There's this beautiful streak of blue in there. Where's that streak of blue coming from? Frank Hurley. If you know Frank Hurley's work, you know what that is. That's his work in Antarctica. That's where the blue is coming from. So the images themselves can tell us about the content, if we can work out a way to show them all. One more example. This is a great one. Oh, I should have said, by the way, Commons Explorer was created by myself and my colleague Sam Hinton at University of Canberra. This one is by my honours student, Ben Ennis Butler. This is work he's doing right now. This is hot off the press, this one. It's lovely. So Ben has got access to an incredible database from the collection of the Australian Prints and Printmaking project at the NGA. It contains about 40,000 works, 12,000 artists, the entire history of printmaking in Australia, essentially. So how do you show everything with that? Well, here's just one very early prototype. That's a histogram, right? That's a frequency graph. On the left-hand side, 1800, on the right-hand side, 1980. Each tower is a pile of works, print works. At the moment, it looks like a histogram. If you zoom in, you start to see that it's actually something else. Well, it is a histogram, but it's made of pictures. Each image is one work, one imaged work from the Prints and Printmaking collection. There's about 12,000 images in here. This is a visual core sample of the history of prints and printmaking in Australia. Here's a little rapid tour. 1800, 1838, 1844, 1850. Again, we're panning through the entire history of prints and printmaking in Australia. We're missing out quite a lot. There's all that stuff off the top that we aren't even seeing. But as a way to sample a huge collection of images, what a rich experience. As I said, it's early days, it's not interactive yet. There's a whole lot of relationships here that we could investigate. We could talk about printmaking studios, media, we could talk about artists, we could talk about galleries, relationships between artists. It's an incredible treasure trove of stuff. But even just as visual material, I think it's lovely. Look at those colours on the right-hand side, the 80s when it all went nuts. So this is the kind of stuff that we're working on. As I said, it's all experiments. I don't think I have any kind of cut and dried solutions. But what I think, what I hope is that it's possible. So, what do we do with all this? A few little kind of ideas to go away with. Show everything. Again, thank you, Stamen. Brilliant motto. Show everything's kind of, it's both fantastic and ridiculous. It's ridiculous because it's impossible. If you have 9 million things, you can't show everything. Or maybe you could work out a way. It's a challenge. It's a provocation. Instead of just saying, just whack a search on it, why not actually try and show everything? Why not actually allow that to happen? Showing relationships, I've discovered, is absolutely vital because the relationships are really, really cool. They help you understand the collection. They help you carve off pieces of collections that you can navigate and understand. Relationships are very important. Also, offer clues. Now, a clue is a piece of partial information. It's not the whole story. It's one little piece of the story. Offering clues is much more fun, much more enticing and exciting than offering a whole bundle, a whole neat package of information which is tied up with a bow, here's the whole story. In Commons Explorer, those little pieces of images are clues. It's not the whole image, it's part of the image. The words from the titles are clues. It's not the whole title, it's part of the title. But by stitching together relationships between clues, between little pieces, you get a much more engaging experience and a much richer understanding of relationships than you would otherwise. Kindle discovery. Discovery is what this stuff is about. It's about finding awesome things, and often finding things that you didn't know that you were looking for. It's about the joy of discovery. I think that's actually why I do this, is because that's the feeling that I love to get out of it. So how do you facilitate that? How do you enable that in a digital collection? Also this, let humans be smart. Humans are really smart. Computers, I believe, are actually fairly dumb. They're very fast, but they're very dumb. So how can you let computers be dumb quickly and do useful things for you, but let the humans do the smart stuff? So the humans are doing the piecing together of those clues, they're forming the context, they're understanding relationships. Let them do that stuff that they're really good at. Maybe if we can do all that, if we can find a way to do that and get this stuff out there, then we get to think beyond that kind of slot. We get to take off the Sidney Nolan, Ned Kelly mask and get a kind of wider view of this stuff. And I think that could be quite fun and engaging. Thanks.